Hello and crystal blessings. Ashley here with the Love and Light School of Crystal Therapy, and I am thrilled today to be interviewing the amazing Nicholas Pearson, who most of you know from previous episodes of this podcast. You probably have some of his amazing books, and that's what we're largely going to be talking about today is crystals and some of the very best crystal healing reads out there, which Nicholas has written. So Nicholas, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a while since we've done a podcast together. I was talking earlier today on Instagram about our episode on ethical crystals, which I still refer people to like on a weekly basis. I think that was the last time we got together for this.
Yeah, I think you're right. Before that, we've talked about Stones of the Goddess, your Stones of the Goddess book. We've talked about crystals for karmic healing. But yeah, I think the last one was the ethical crystals chat, which was a really good one. So many people learned a lot from that, had a lot of takeaways.
Well, hopefully we can give them some more fun today.
I think we will be able to accomplish that. Well, I'm really excited about this because I have an early copy of your book, Crystal Basics Pocket Encyclopedia, that's coming out officially in early March. But you can get it now from your publisher, innertraditions.com. And folks can get signed copies from you on Etsy, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll give all those links to people to make it easy.
Now, I have to tell you, I got to see this book before it was ever in its paper physical form, because you had me write a little blurb for the cover, which I love. Thank you for including that. But I have to tell you, the thing that I loved about this book was it was so unexpected. It was so different than anything out there. You and I, we both have a lot of crystal books. I mean, I'm sure well over 1,000 between the two of us. Um, and there's not really anything quite like this book out there. There are some things that I really love about it that I'd like to share in a minute, but I'd love to know from you, what was kind of the thing that inspired you to create this book because it is so different, and what do you find unique about it?
Well, thank you for all that. I think, I'm going to be really transparent. One of the reasons that I wrote this book is because pocket encyclopedias are popular. And transparently, I have a bunch, and a lot of them don't necessarily meet all of my needs. And crystal market changes. So, a sample of a couple hundred or 400 stones from 15 years ago is probably different than the most popular stuff on the market today. So all books are a snapshot in time, but I think especially with a book like this, it's very much a snapshot of the here and now. So I wanted to have something that was a little fresher, a little more up to date. I wanted to go like broader coverage than I could do in Crystal Basics. There's so much meaty textbook stuff in that. I could only fit 200 crystals in. In fact, it was actually shy of 200 until very late in the game. We squeezed in 4 more to make a round number. And with the Pocket Encyclopedia, I wanted to do a lot of the opposite. I wanted it to be easy to navigate, portable. That was a big piece of feedback I got from the other Crystal Basics. And I wanted to create something that really stood on its own and felt not overwhelming, because 450 is a lot of stones. It's a whole heck of a lot. And it's definitely not the most you're going to find in a pocket encyclopedia, but I think it's a really healthy number. And I just wanted to make it succinct. As they say, brevity is the key to clear communication. And I'm not always known for writing small things. And this was a really fun challenge to get there.
I think you definitely accomplished all of those goals that you set out for because truly it kind of ticks all those boxes. So, for those of you who might have Crystal Basics for reference, here is the Pocket Encyclopedia. Now, I will say it's a nice little companion because it does have all those extra stones. But as Nicholas was saying, there's a number of pocket guides out there, out on the market. And I'll say they are all lacking in one way or another. And you can tell that an avid crystal book reader wrote this. You can tell that a crystal lover wrote this because it truly does have everything you want. It's organized in a nice way. The photos are, they're there. You can see what the stones are, you can appreciate them. And the way that the information is laid out is really succinct, like you said, but also gives you everything you'd want to know in the moment from a pocket guide. I mean, you have chemical formulas, mineral hardness, crystal system, the formation process, the chakras, the correspondences, and then you have physical, psychological, and spiritual healing properties. And in addition to all of that, for 450 crystals, there is this great introduction that really goes through how to work with stones. And I think you often find one or the other in crystal books. You find this whole litany of crystals with associated properties and things like that, which can be, decent for reference, or you find more of a how-to book, but you don't often find both of those together. So how did you decide on what to include in that introduction? Like, why did you choose certain topics to share in this little pocket reference?
That was honestly the hardest part for me, I think, other than just like narrowing down exactly the 450, because there are so many. But making sure that I had those intro chapters that were original content. I didn't want to recycle or rehash everything verbatim, but shorter from Crystal Basics. Yes, there's overlap. There's a reason their titles are similar. It's because they're part of the same family, but they really are standalone works. And I got some really important feedback from my editor early on in the editorial process. And she was considering how you can go to anywhere and find crystals. And where you find them may not have guides to help you figure that out. And because of that, the kind of people who are coming into the crystal world may not have a background in metaphysics and spirituality and energy. I mean, if you can find crystal related products in Walmart and other places, then obviously we're not all coming with built-in knowledge. So I had to kind of hone in on what is the most fundamental thing I can teach people in a few short paragraphs at a time. What can I do with this book to make it separate from Crystal Basics? How can I add value to every entry in here so I'm not just having a shorter version of that? So the introduction of correspondences was really important to me for that. So that way there was original input on all of the stones that were recycled. We added a bunch of tables and a couple of glossaries to it, especially thinking, how would someone who doesn't know anything about energy healing or kind of metaphysical spiritual practice, what are words that they're going to need to know? And I went through and subtracted a lot of jargon so that way I wouldn't have a massive glossary either. But really, it's like, if I could only give you a few pages to teach you how to work with crystals, these are like the takeaways that I hope you will contemplate. I will also hope that you'll love them enough you'll want to pursue them elsewhere and get more depth than I could put in a pocket encyclopedia. So I was just there to kind of whet someone's appetite for it.
You were so thoughtful and intentional about the creation process of this book, really every step of the way. And you and I had several conversations when you were in those kind of final stages of choosing, okay, which crystals go in, which ones do I have to leave out? I want to kind of take that idea and touch back on something you said earlier, which is about how the mineral market is always changing, right? There are always new finds and then things that become popular, things that somehow strangely fall out of fashion, which I know a lot of people think this whole world of crystal healing is brand new, but you and I have been around for a while. We know there are things that have just kind of fallen by the wayside over the years, and then things that make their resurgence. So, 450 stones is a lot of stones, but how did you kind of determine which ones made the cut? How did you go through that process? And how did the mineral market, if at all, kind of influence what you were choosing to showcase in the book?
Yeah, this is a great topic. So, first and foremost, I started with those 200 from Crystal Basics, and I kind of went through very methodically and said, which of these have lived their popularity on the market? There were a couple things that I thought were new and exciting that I added to Crystal Basics that like dried up like a flash in the pan. And so they didn't make it into this. So it's not a carbon copy of those 200 plus 250 more. And the other kind of paradigm that I used was to make sure that I could find things that I couldn't find in other books, things that were either popular in terms of the retail side of it, having worked metaphysical retail for a good number of years. I get to see what comes in, what goes out, what people ask for. And I wanted to ensure that even if it was kind of hard to find, if there was buzz about it, like rainbow lattice sunstone, I to this day I can't find a dedicated description of it in a crystal book so far. And if there is one that predates mine, I want to find it because I want to give people credit. And there were a handful of other things like that. Of course, our old favorites have to be in there for that kind of foundational level knowledge. And one of the different directions I went in with this book than my others was to make sure I had room for common rocks because they will always be around and they may never be popular, strictly speaking, but I wanted to, in a sense, I have this overwhelming desire, but not a lot of know how to make this happen just yet. But I really want to work on like decolonizing crystal work. And I know that that term is polarizing and means different things to different people. So I want to hold space for the complexity there. But among spiritual practices, among energy medicine practices, crystal healing is very uniquely market driven. It is a uniquely consumerist approach. You have to buy the tools. The number of tools changes, the quality of the tools changes. And as someone who's been around for crystals a long time, your taste tends to change and elevate as well. So I felt this kind of ethical imperative to include things that won't cost people money because you could find them in your backyard or in your local park or as building material in your home. I mean, those things are crystals as well. The limestone beneath me is made out of microcrystalline calcite, and it's really cool. And I keep some around the house because I love it so much. And there's a power to that. So I kind of took several cross sections of what fascinates me and what I hope to do with the market, ensure our basics are covered, reflect changing market trends, and put things in there that require no extra monetary investment. So if you live in Granite Mountains, you know about the healing power of granite, and you can use that as a valuable and viable healing tool. So some more exciting things didn't make the cut, so I could make sure I had rhyolite and gneiss and marble and limestone and all these other things in there to work on that part of kind of hoping to deconsumerize some of what we do. That being said, I love things. I'm going to keep buying things. I can't help it. So I'll keep buying rocks, but we've spent some time away from home together recently. And wouldn't you know, I had rocks in my pocket that I found in public places the whole time.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like about this approach, and this is something, I've also had conversations about harkening back to our ethical sourcing discussion and recent conversations as we've been planning our retreat together in Glastonbury. There's this way of the how you do what you do that you really elevate the humble stones that we find in our local landscape. And I think that there's something so valuable about that because so often in the crystal healing world, which is consumers driven, as you mentioned, we tend to gravitate toward the most sparkly, the most colorful, the most shiny, the most dare I say, like exotic looking things in a lot of ways, things that
Mhm.
are coming from far away. And we talked about this in our ethical sourcing discussion, just as with the things that we eat, we may strive to eat locally. It makes a lot of sense to source some of our crystals locally, not just from an environmental standpoint and an ethical sourcing standpoint in other ways, but also because of the connection to the energy of the land that we live on or that we occupy. And so I find it really humbling and just pretty awesome that you've chosen to include some of these more common stones that we might be able to find around us because of that, because we should all know what's right out in our backyard. We should all know what we want to connect with.
Yeah, we often hear herbalists talk about how the most powerful medicines are the ones that grow in our backyard or the most timely and relevant. herbal medicines are the ones we find in our local landscape. And I think the exact same thing is true of the stones. Oftentimes the magic we need, the energy we need is right there. It's under our feet. It's in the facade of our home. It's in the cobblestones that you take in downtown. If we stop and appreciate them, we often find pretty wonderful things. And you're hard pressed to not see me lagging behind a group if there's a really nice granite countertop somewhere. Um, my husband and my parents and I, we recently did dinner together, and I picked the table we sat at based on which one had the most exotic mega crysts, like giant crystals in the granite makeup of the table. So and that's par for the course for me. But think of all those times we forget to acknowledge the humble stones in our landscape. Think of how much potential is there, because the definition of a rock is an aggregate of minerals. Minerals by definition are naturally occurring inorganic crystals. Rocks are made of crystals. And I think the more we hold space for the humble stuff and learn to appreciate what makes them exotic and wonderful and cool, then we also elevate our appreciation of those really fine mineral specimens we see at the Tucson, fine mineral showcase and places like that. It's because I've gotten nerdy about the limestone beneath me, or the blue lias, the limestone and shale strata that make up the landscapes of Southwest Great Britain where we're going, or my appreciation for the metamorphosis of granites in certain parts of New England. By just going and reading about them and seeing them, now I have a whole new set of eyes that I use to look at my quartz and my calcite and all my other things with, because there's crossover there. When we learn about one, it enriches the other.
And I can attest to this firsthand, because how many times while we were in Tucson did I look back toward the car only to see Nicholas hunched over in the parking lot looking at a stone?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mhm. I have quartzite that I brought back. I have this little shale that has teeny tiny crystals of stuff I can't identify yet. I got to get some powerful magnification, but like little amygdaloids that filled with fluid and then crystallized in an otherwise soft, crumbly rock. That's really cool to me. So they have personality. And you know, I think some of the most appreciated, I know I keep making the plant analogy, but you and I are also both plant people, so we get it. I think some of the most reliable and trustworthy medicines in the standard herbalist toolbox are pretty humble things. They're not rare exotic stuff. It's stuff you could grow in your backyard. It's stuff that might be growing in your biome already. If it's not native, it might have gotten naturalized by accident. And I feel the same way about rocks. And that's why, in particular, one of many reasons why I should say, I'm so excited for the upcoming retreat, because we get to shift the focus toward the landscape and find mystery among the mundane. And my love of rocks and minerals it's kind of like a crooked path. I veer towards really fine minerals, and then I find a really cool piece of granite, and that's what I work with for 3 weeks. And then I shell out the big bucks for that rhodonite that probably shouldn't have come home with me, and back and forth meandering. And I just want to encourage people to realize that whatever tools they have available to them are the right tools. You do not need all 450 rocks that are in this book. If you can make a small toolkit that is meaningful to you, even if half of the rocks are, we'll say, foraged, you probably have a really good toolkit as long as you get to know those rocks.
I think all of that passion and that variety of things that you're interested in when it comes to stones really kind of shines through from the pages of your book. So that is one of the things that I love about this. Purely just the variety of minerals that you've included, which we've been talking about a little bit. So I'm wondering, is there anything that didn't make the cut that you really wanted to include, but, for brevity, because a book, it couldn't be a cube, it couldn't be a brick. Is there anything that you had to kind of cut?
There was honestly, in my initial wish list, there was a lot that didn't make the cut, but I pared that down. Now the shape of the book changed a lot from my proposal. I went from, one vision, and then I was like, oh, what if I do a slightly smaller one and then make 3 of them? but my publisher wasn't so keen on that. So it's like, okay, well, we're going to inflate again, and this time I'm going to ask for more than I originally asked for to make sure it's all in there. But still, in that transition, I went from I'll do like 300 to 3 volumes of 200, and I came up with a list of 600 stones approximately. So obviously, a quarter of that didn't make the cut. Some were just because they weren't exciting enough, and others because I wanted to just have room for other things. So let's talk about some. Um, I I like weird agates. So there are a few that either didn't make it because they were probably too costly for the average person, or because I just don't think they're popular enough, or in one case, they don't necessarily photograph well all the time. So bamboo agate didn't make the cut. They're super weird. They formed around organic plant matter, and then well, that's long gone, but they're like these weird, almost pseudo stalactites. But in favor of all the others, it didn't make the cut. Red fox, also known as crater agate, which is very, very slightly radioactive. Nothing to worry about. You can handle it like normal and it's fine. But that one also didn't make the cut because I was over budget buying rocks, so I couldn't get another expensive rare stone for it. Um, there were a few that I think just specialty collectors know them well, but maybe the average collector less. Stuff like clinozoisite and glaucophane. Um, I wanted to have a couple different relatives of labradorite in there under the labradorite section, like this midnight blue material that came out of Madagascar a few years ago, and you still find it on the market. It's not super expensive, but it has a silver cat's eye effect in addition to the bright blue. And I thought, we're never going to capture the depth of that in a still image the size of a quarter. So that one doesn't have to make it. And stuff like that. I wrote up some of those B-sides that didn't make the cut, and others were just kind of generally on the wish list. So, Smoky Amethyst was one that got cut very late in the game. Condor Agate, Fancy Agate, I took out because I've written about it more than once already, and there's some other just better resources that can go deeper in depth in it. Wind Fossil Agate is just not exciting on the market, and it's kind of a misleading name. There's no fossil about it. And it's in one of my other books that didn't make the cut. Alexandrite. I feel bad that Alexandrite isn't in there, but I just couldn't get a good one to photograph. So it didn't get in by the deadline, and I was able to give that away to another stone instead. So there were a handful that were there that's so close, and I just had to make room for others.
You know what I like about this is it's like an insight into literally what it's like as an author trying to make these decisions, and being mindful of the fact that okay, some of these are not very budget friendly for the average consumer. Some of these are not really commercially available. They're very difficult to get a hold of. But you still manage to capture a really good cross section of what's out there. If you had to suggest 5 crystals that are in this book that would be really good foundational stones for anyone's toolkit, they don't all necessarily have to be common, although some can be, what would your 5 crystals be? Because I'm just thinking, this is such a great book for anyone getting started with crystals, that if you wanted to kind of get your friends or your family into crystals, this will make such a nice gift. And how cool to be able to give them like 5 crystals to get them started along with it. But also, in case we are lacking in our own crystal toolkits on some of the good basic foundational stones, which 5 would you recommend?
So when I always struggle with these kinds of questions because part of my platform is not being prescriptive and like really thinking things through. But there's a caveat. What if we think about things that are really multifaceted and really heavy hitters? So I would like to kind of come at it from that approach. So, I mean, first and foremost, start with quartz. Quartz of any flavor, color, or shape of your choosing, but start with the quartz family. You're going to have a really broad spectrum kind of stone. If you've got clear quartz as your kind of foundational stone, I mean, there are more crystal books devoted to only working with quartz than there are just about any other specialized topic in crystal healing. And that is a really good testament to just how effective it is. I would also say, like my personal practice, my journey, obsidian is a really great foundation stone. It can be a little heavy to work with, but it has more than one face it can show us. And for lack of a better way to put it, the honesty of obsidian's energy, the way it just reflects things as they are underneath the surface, not as they are on the surface, but underneath it, it's like having that really honest friend. They have zero filter, there's no chill, but you're always glad when they speak their mind anyway. It might sting a little bit, but when you incorporate that feedback, you feel so much better because you know someone has your back. So much so that they're willing to have the uncomfortable conversation with you. So that's obsidian for me. Anyone who's listened to me talk about crystals for more than like 5 minutes at a time knows that I love rhodonite. So that's going to go on my list because I can scarcely go anywhere without it. Um, Even if I don't wear it around the clock when I travel, it comes with me and I wear it through all the anxious bits of travel because so many of us, I think, in a fast paced world, we need a little help slowing down and unwinding. And rhodonite works on my emotional state to help me accomplish just that. It keeps me a little bit more even keeled, which is useful. And who isn't a little stressed out from time to time? So that's one of my favorites for that. So, kind of shifting gears a little bit, another really broad spectrum stone that I think a lot of us would benefit from would be carnelian. Carnelian got like really super hot on TikTok for just a small section of what it does, but I think is a really multifaceted stone. We can use it when we feel a sense of spiritual, emotional, mental burnout. We can use it when we need that creative boost. I like to use it when I'm stuck in a rut. It's like the additional energy that overcomes inertia in whatever is happening. For that reason, it's sometimes used in like karmic and past life healing because it's overcoming the inertia of our karma to kind of, learn when to step off the track kind of thing. You see the freight train coming, so like do something about it, energetically speaking. And I mean, it's just, there's thousands upon thousands of years of traditional uses for physical, spiritual, emotional healing. So it's a stone that does a little bit of everything and it does it pretty well. Um, and that should be four if memory serves. So for number five, um, I'm torn between two, but they're the same mineral species. So I hope you'll forgive me for cheating a little bit here, but I would say pick either aquamarine and or emerald. Aqua has been a favorite of mine for a very long time, again, because it's so multifaceted. I think one of the deeper things that all beryls do, which is what mineral species these both are, is helps us get to the blueprint underneath things. So aqua is about letting go of the dust that inhibits your light from shining. That might help you communicate better. It might help you maybe take some risks and feel a little bit more courageous. It might help you learn to go with the flow. There's so many ways that can manifest. But it's definitely a clarity kind of stone. On the other side of that, emerald also works at this kind of blueprint level, but it does so from very specifically the heart's perspective. And you and I, we've got a lot we're going to be doing with emerald very soon, so I won't go too far into it. But my dear friend Sharon Britton, who's one of my favorite people in the crystal world, she phrases emerald this way. She says that it exalts the heart chakra. When we use the chakra model, we often think about blocking and unblocking, and we don't go much deeper than that. But think of this idea of exalting the heart, even if we take the chakra bit out of it, but the core of who you are, core literally coming from Latin meaning heart, and to recognize how valuable your heart is, how valuable your heart space is, how all the things you're made out of follow a blueprint, and that blueprint is unconditional love. In other words, another way to say this, emerald reminds you that you are worthy of unconditional love without having to do anything. You don't have to earn it, you just are. And that's a message we don't hear enough in today's world. So, both of these barrels relate to the blueprint, but different manifestations of it. So I have a hard time choosing.
Okay, can I just say I'm so glad that you included both because I think they're both so important. And kind of on that vein, I would love to go back to your very first recommendation, which was quartz, because we have some listeners who are probably newer to crystals, right? Who might not know quartz is a family. We're not just talking about clear quartz. Quartz being silicon dioxide shows up in many different ways. Would you like to just tell everybody a little bit more? And what it like, is it, do you think clear quartz is the one they should go with? Or are you saying just pick something from the quartz family and it'll be like your buddy for number one?
I mean, you've got options here. So let's take a step back and look at how we actually differentiate mineral species. So a mineral, as I mentioned earlier, is a naturally occurring inorganic crystal. So a crystal is structurally considered to be something that has a regular composition. It's the same ingredients, more or less, through and through. And then it has the same kind of structure, the same shape. If you could look at how the molecules arrange themselves, you could connect the dots and make a geometric form out of that. And it's that same form over and over and over and over again until it fills all the space and you end up with a crystal. So, in the case of minerals, crystals, mineral species can have lots of different colors if we have just tiny traces of other stuff. It's not enough to change the formula. So geologically, there's still the same mineral species. So technically, there are two quartzes in my list because carnelian is considered a variety of quartz. Now, you can't see its crystals with the naked eye, so we call that cryptocrystalline from the word that means hidden. So hidden crystal structure, but it's in microscopic quartz crystals, and then some iron oxide. That's your free gift with the purchase, I suppose. But with the quartz family, we have the macrocrystalline quartzes, the one whose shapes we can see, like this little Congo citrine that I'm holding up. And then you've got microcrystalline quartzes like jasper, agate, carnelian, chalcedony, flint, and the like. So all of them, to a geologist, have the same ingredients, the same unit cell, or the same fundamental shape. And we can play with those. We can take the same fundamental shape and fill the available space differently. Are we filling it with one single solid crystal, like one beautiful, transparent, flawless, six-sided prism that makes a quartz crystal? Or are we compacting lots of other crystals together? And when we compact them together, there's room for other stuff to fit between the spaces, which is why we have so many colors of agate and jasper and the like. But I would say in this list, for the sake of argument, I'm picking a crystalline quartz, something that forms crystals. Now, you don't have to have a natural crystal shape. You can have a tumbled stone, a palm stone, you could have a crystal skull, a crystal pyramid, whatever you like to work with. But any of those crystalline varieties of quartz with their varying degrees of transparency, depending on the quality we get, the difference between them, chemically speaking, is so minuscule. I had an instructor in the geological world use this metaphor, and this is an approximation. If you had a 1 foot cube of clear quartz, perfectly transparent, no flaws, and you wanted to turn it into amethyst, for example, the amount of iron that you need is less iron than you have in the tip of a ballpoint pen. So
Wow.
we're talking a few molecules. That's it. So they're more alike, chemically speaking, structurally speaking, than they are different. So really, from like the most basic level, they're all heavy hitters. They're all multifaceted. They're all good multitaskers. So if you find yourself drawn to clear quartz, do that. If you want smoky or amethyst or citrine or whatever, go for it. But certainly clear quartz not having extra ingredients is going to give us the broadest spectrum, which we also see, when we use it as a prism. It makes that full light. If you take a natural piece in the sunlight and you play with it, you can find those little rainbows that appear as light passes through. You can do that with the other varieties, but it's not as resplendent as clear quartz. And I think that kind of signals the specialization that the trace elements that give them their color provides. So with plain old clear quartz, we get the most undifferentiated white light. It's just so much potential. So that's a nice place to start. But if you love amethyst, go there instead.
Amazing. Nicholas, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. I love hearing about the process behind the new book, your suggestions for our 5 foundational minerals to have in our crystal toolkits. And could you tell everyone where they can find the Crystal Basics Pocket Edition, which is out now, and how they can get signed copies and stay in touch with you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. So by the time this airs, this will be available from every major and minor retailer. Go visit your local indie store. I know they love that. You can find it with all the big box stores in person or online, like Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But if you'd love a signed copy, I do have links on my website, which is theluminous.pearl.com. It'll take you to my Etsy shop where I've got signed books available. And if you'd love to stay in touch with me, find out when I'm doing more classes and workshops and other things, which won't happen immediately because by the time people hear this, I'm going to be on this wonderful adventure with you overseas. But I usually have a lot of things going on each month. So you can sign up for my newsletter on the website as well. And again, that's www.theluminouspearl.com.
Awesome. And you also have monthly masterclasses over on your Patreon and other events, and people can find those on your website as well.
For sure.
Great. Again, Nicholas, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure. I can't wait for all of you to get a copy of this book in your hands. It is amazing. And let's be honest, it's pretty darling. So thank you again, Nicholas, so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ashley. And thanks for everyone who's listening.
Until we see you next time, thank you so much for tuning in, and crystal blessings.